Family. What if I told you one of the most brilliant black minds in American history was invited into the highest rooms of power and still ended up marked as a problem? And the man he was fighting hardest wasn't just the government. It was the most powerful black man of the time, Booker T. Washington. This is the story of W.E.B. Du Bois. Before he was the doctor, he was just Willie, born in 1868 in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, a mostly white town. His father, Alfred, walked out early, leaving his mother, Mary Sylvina, to raise him on a wing and a prayer. Mary was the backbone. She pushed Willie toward books like they were gold. He grew up around white kids thinking the world was fair, until a girl in school refused his visiting card just because he was black. That was his first heartbreak. It wasn't just a rejection. It was the moment he realized he was behind a veil. He decided right then, if they wouldn't let him in through the front door, he'd outthink every person in the room. Willie was extraordinarily intelligent in the classroom. Then, after high school graduation, Du Bois went south to Fisk University. That's where he first tasted Southern racism. Then Harvard, the first black man to get a Ph.D. there. He even studied in Berlin, wearing top hats and walking with a cane, soaking up the world. He believed if he could just prove black people were brilliant, the prejudice would melt away. He was naive, family. He was preparing for a debate while the South was preparing for a purge. In Germany, he saw something dangerous, a world where ideas shaped power. He learned how elites think, how systems justify themselves, how oppression hides behind language. That's how he entered rooms with powerful white men. Not because they trusted him, but because they needed his brilliance and family. That scared them. Dr. Du Bois moved from Ohio to Philadelphia. And while there, we worked on his later published study, The Philadelphia Negro. The details in this study challenged the philosophy of some of the Negro leaders of the time, like Frederick Douglass. Then things changed for him in 1899. Du Bois and his wife Nina relocated to Georgia as Dr. Du Bois worked for the HBCU, Atlanta University, as a professor of history and economics. While there, he wanted to investigate a lynching. He believed facts could change minds. Then he saw the charred knuckles of a recently lynched Negro, Sam Hose, in a pickle jar for sale in a shop window. That's when Du Bois understood the truth. America didn't misunderstand racism, it profited from it. From that moment on, the scholar became a threat. Enter Booker T. Now, Booker was the Wizard of Tuskegee. He told black folks, cast down your buckets. Don't fight for the vote, just learn to farm and build. The white donors loved him. They flooded him with cash, but Du Bois saw a trap. He saw that if we gave up our right to think and vote, we'd be slaves by another name. The tension was thick. Du Bois was the neighbor who wanted you to be an architect. Booker wanted you to be the bricklayer. They weren't just arguing. They were fighting for the soul of the race. Du Bois risked his funding and his safety to call out the most powerful black man in America. That's a lonely place to be. Now, family, this part requires honesty. Booker T. Washington built Tuskegee from nothing: education, jobs, stability. Du Bois respected the work, but rejected the silence. Booker asked how we survive today. Du Bois asked who we become tomorrow. That disagreement split black leadership, and history only remembers one side at a time. Du Bois wasn't forgotten by accident, he was erased. The breaking point? 1906, the Atlanta race riot. White mobs were tearing through the streets, pulling black men off streetcars. Du Bois was away on a research trip and rushed home, terrified for his wife and daughter. He bought that shotgun I mentioned earlier. He sat there realizing his Ph.D. meant nothing to a man with a torch. He realized the polite way was over. You see, Dr. Du Bois aligned with Ida B. Wells. She brought fearless reporting. He brought national reach. Together they made silence impossible. And silence is what power depends on. Out of that smoke and fire, something new was born. And this small group of rebels met in secret to form the Niagara Movement, which would lead to the Naacp. They were broke, they were hated, and they were up against the entire U.S. government. But family, the story doesn't end there. How did this man go from the darling of the Ivy League to a man the FBI labeled a threat? And did he ever see his dream in the eyes of a young Dr. King? We'll get into the exile and the final reckoning in part 2. Before you go, ask yourself, if your world started burning tonight, would you reach for a book or a shield? Now, let's talk about his inner circle. History books love to make the Naacp look like a polite tea party, but Du Bois had a secret weapon, Ida B. Wells. They were the original troublemakers. While Booker T was preaching patience, Ida and Willie were shouting for justice. They didn't always agree. Ida thought the Naacp was a bit too moderate at first, but they shared a grit that most people couldn't handle. They were backed by a mix of radical white donors and Jewish activists who realized that if black folks weren't free, nobody was. Mary White Ovington brought funding and access. White legal minds brought courtroom strategy. Du Bois brought the vision. Together, they turned the Crisis magazine into the most dangerous publication in America. The magazine exposed lynching, promoted black artists, named injustice plainly. He turned culture into resistance. By the 1950s, the government decided Du Bois was too dangerous. He wasn't just talking about civil rights anymore. He was talking about world peace and the evils of capitalism. At 83 years old, they dragged this elder into court, calling him a Soviet agent just for circulating a peace petition. The FBI tracked his every move, thousands of pages of files. He was eventually acquitted, but the damage was done. America had turned its back on its greatest scholar. They took his passport. They tried to starve him out, but they forgot one thing. A man who has seen a race riot doesn't scare easily. Now, did he ever meet the young Dr. King? Yes, family, they crossed paths. Du Bois actually sent a telegram to a young Martin during the Montgomery bus boycott in 1956, encouraging him to fear not. They didn't always see eye to eye on how to win. Du Bois was becoming a socialist, while King was still finding his radical voice. But King never forgot who cleared the path. Years later, King stood at Carnegie Hall and called Du Bois a genius whom America tried to mute. They were two bookends of the same struggle. One started the fire, and the other carried the torch. By '93, Willie had had enough. President Kwame Nkrumah invited him to Ghana to help build a new Africa. He packed his bags, renounced his U.S. citizenship, and moved. He spent his final days working on the Encyclopedia Africana, finally surrounded by the respect he never fully got at home. He died on August 27, 1963, just hours before the March on Washington began. When Roy Wilkins announced his death to the 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial, a silence fell over the crowd that you could feel in your bones. He died a citizen of the world, but his heart was always with the struggle he left behind. So family, here is the truth they don't put in the books. W.E.B. Du Bois wasn't just a man of words. He was a man who chose exile over silence. He showed us that sometimes to find your true home, you have to leave the one that doesn't love you back. He gave us the tools to understand the color line, and it's up to us to finish the work.
Now, before you go, if this story sat heavy on your heart, do your auntie a favor. Click that like button and subscribe to this channel.